Oh, hello everyone. Beginning of week 8 and the end of the term, and well, my wife told me it's time to get a haircut. The thunderstorms outside have driven me inside for this last video of the year. The quiz is open. There's one question and the answer is true. So go ahead and get that out of the way right away. Um, Another thing for this week that you want to remember is that um, you want to get me your 3-page essay over one of the books, or some of you have written on the Hunger Games, but I've gotten some good stuff too from The Knife of Never Letting Go and Unwind, so keep it up. And get that to me by Friday at midnight. Okay? The discussion thread this week, which includes, by the way, a link to Allegra's, for some reason, her last name escapes me, the author of our book that we're reading, The Other Side of the Island, and I keep doing The Other Side of the Mountain in my mind, a movie about, and a book about a woman skier who suffered a horrible accident. At any rate, you have the discussion thread, and I have a link there to the author's homepage where she says she'd like to hear from everybody, and I quote something that she wrote at the end of the book to get you going here. Also, final exam, which I have posted, and if you look in your announcements, you have the topic for the final exam essay, which you can begin writing right now. Again, you can go and go there multiple times between Wednesday morning and Friday at midnight. If you're in a big hurry, just because I wanted to, in case something came up, I actually have it that those exams are starting at Tuesday at 10 o'clock at night. I'm trying to put defaults in there so that things don't get messed up. But I've been so ditzy since the dentist still going through this procedure. So if you see any mistakes, let me know. I captured a couple, like The Other Side of the Mountain. Anyway, the exam's up. The announcement gives you a description of the essay, and the announcement for this week also offers a list of prompts, 5 from each book. I put them in pairs. There are 10 prompts that I created. You'll write on 5 from a pool. Make sure that you put the responses in the appropriate place on the exam. Don't just send them to me as a Word document. Keep the Word document backup of everything that you write in case if something goes wrong. And, we're dealing with technology, and the truth is that matters do go wrong more often than we'd like. Okay, so you're going to get that exam, and remember 6 to 8 sentences on each of the prompts and a strong essay. Now, that was posted last week, and I've put the link again on this week's announcement. I don't know if it's on the blog or not, but doesn't really matter. This week's announcement also has a link to prompts and essay responses with my short comments from the last exam, so to help you improve there. Okay, now we read 4 novels: Feed, Unwind, The Life of Never Letting Go, and this pretty short one, The Other Side of the Island. So on the prompts, you want to make sure, one, that you've read all 4 novels, and you want to make sure, too, that you do 2 things. You write responses from at least 3 of the 4 novels, okay? And no more than 2 responses from any one novel. Now, if you get a series of prompts that makes it so you can't possibly do 3 of the 4 novels, then just make sure you follow the other guideline. You should be able to. I've spaced them all out. It might turn out that it's a prompt that you don't like, but that's too bad. That's the way it goes. I've given you the ones, you can study them. Again, addressing the significance, so don't spend a whole bunch of time giving every time something comes up about it without even talking about it in terms of the significant conflicts and themes of the novel from which any prompt comes. The same goes for the essay question about the 4 different couples. Although you're going to find that Honor, Heloise, and Helix is not this huge kissy kind of thing. So doesn't it's a little different for this novel, as you're going to see. So I wrote on there that you could write about the relationship between Honor's parents, who are Pamela and is it Will? Yes, Pamela and Will. It was close to my name, so I thought for sure I must have messed something up. So, final exam, parts 1 and 2. Part 2 you can return to as many times as you want between, there it is, 10 o'clock at night Tuesday and midnight Friday. That's the final official day of our class. You work on the discussion threads until Saturday at midnight. Sunday we'll be on the road to Peru, and grades go in Monday morning. So everything will get done quickly here. Remember that the grades are weighted, and I have to make sure I have that completely done now for you. That is to say, each quiz is worth 2% of your final grade. Each discussion thread is 2% of your grade. So if you have 10 points on your discussion thread, you get 2 points. If you get 9.5, you get, 1.9 points. However it works, this is going to be 8% of your total grade. For each section, that's 16% times 2. So if you work hard on the discussion threads and the quizzes, you've nailed down 32% of the grade. Okay. Now the discussion, everybody who turned in their papers before last Friday have gotten them back. I have one that I will get back in time tomorrow or the next day for a revision. Otherwise, it's going to be hit and miss. And I won't have time to give lots of comments. And I enjoy putting a lot of comments on papers to try to help people make their prose stronger, write with clarity, and things along those lines. So when you get your essay back, sometimes it does require that you revision it. That's what a revision means, a re-looking at things. So nothing gets wasted. That's the important point. But the other thing is to look over those essays and prompt answers, and then study these prompts here, and read your book. And this book, The Other Side of the Mountains, by a very successful author, and I did put a link where she gives a talk at the National Book Awards. She won one for the novel that came after this. This is her venture into YA literature. A lot of the time she writes about Orthodox Jews. A very interesting topic, one you don't hear people writing about. Chaim Potik, I can't think of his last name, was a famous author who wrote about that particular element of American society, and this one particular was from New York. One of his books is called The Chosen. Anyway, but her comments are interesting, and a chance to get to know the author a little bit more. It's a kind of hit and miss sometimes on these kinds of videos, but this one I think does her justice. So now, one of the things I mentioned on the discussion thread this time, and I'll just expand on it a little bit here, because it's the issues raised in this story are not unfamiliar at all. But what's nice, two of the things that I think you'll like is, one is, as you're going to find out in this particular novel, as we have in the comedy of Carbon Diaries, remember, our hero, heroette, our hero, really is a sort of rebellious teenager and thinks that her parents are jerks. Not unusual. In this and in a lot of them, the parents, good lord, they try to kill their kids and unwind. They're pretty much absent in the knife of never letting go. They're kind of a worthless in the feed. But at any rate, you're going to find in this one is that the first person narratives and whatnot that you've had before. This one gives you a different look because Honor and Heloise. Uh, the conflict is that she just wants her parents to conform, and so she doesn't look like an idiot. So her parents are a constant embarrassment and worry and concern because she wants to fit in, just like Violet did until she found out what the price was. At any rate, so you're going to, part of the fun of this one is the character development of Honor as the story progresses. And of course, the other thing that I wanted to bring up, and as I said before, Helix is an interesting character, Helix Thompson. His parents flee, as you're going to find out later on when they use the word disappeared. There are a couple things there about just that word, and then I'll tie it in with some other of the vocabulary. People who don't follow the things, who aren't accurate, there's a whole vocabulary here, are taken. And one of the other words to say is they disappear. Or the implication is that Earth Mother disappears them. And this kind of language using that as to mean killed or something almost like that comes from the insurgencies primarily that we hear in Central America, where you had the grandmothers, I think, of the disappeared, the Desparacito, and they marched around the Centroville in Buenos Aires to protest what the generals had done, which is to say they had disappeared their grandchildren. Of course, no one's going to attack grandmothers in the square, so they became quite famous. But so the junta also knocked off people right and left, and this went on throughout Central America. And so that has a really strong connotation with prejudice, as we would say, to disappear someone. They're never heard from again, and you don't ever get any details. They're just taken, and for a variety of reasons. And so that language is interesting there. The other thing is that science fiction, and this is, as I've mentioned before, is very important, let's say, in film. But also in writing. Science fiction wants you to believe in the possibility of the world created. It doesn't. It asks you for a willing suspension of disbelief, but there's sort of this striving for what we call verisimilitude, the familiar. It keeps our attention enough so that we're willing to suspend disbelief that we're watching a movie or reading a book about Earth. We don't know how many years in the future, with all kinds of different things going on. But one of the ways you bridge that so that people will buy the possibility is by using familiar things. And so in this case, it would be a lot of language, a lot of language like Earth Mother. There's nothing terrorizing about that one. And the weather station, new weather, we can believe in those kinds of things. There's a curriculum, and they study weather in the curriculum and climatology. And there's questions about there's questions about numbered islands, for instance. None of these is it's what we do stars, number them. But the problem is of course, when you realize the dissimilarity between a term like Earth Mother and how that is used to control in this authoritarian society that likes to see itself as making everybody safe and secure and love the earth, and tell everybody that the ocean's bad for you. When you see with Honor the first time she goes near the ocean with her father, and also you see the power, the complete power of what happens with education. If education can mold young people, uh, they want to believe. And actually, when we're reading science fiction, we want to believe that there are certain things that are plausible, such as problems with food shortages, global warming, rising oceans, and we have here again is not saying that the ocean's going to rise, but again, and as the discussion thread mentions from the perspective of the author, one of her quotations I use there is that there's a lot in contemporary society, as you've all quite notably, those who have responded and have done a good job on the discussion threads, that Unwind, as crazy as it sounds, reflects a lot of conflicts in contemporary society. And so these kinds of works for youngsters, we have a 10-year-old, 11-year-old young lady here, that is supposed to generate questions about the here and the now. Sophisticated science fiction is not simply an adventure story with rockets and ray guns. All sophisticated science fiction raises questions about the now. So bear that in mind. There are lots of things that look familiar that you realize after a while, whoa, wait a minute. Earth Mother's disappearing people. The teacher's name is Mrs. Blessing. One of my favorite is Mrs. Tuttle, the librarian. And what's going on here, the currents of revolt are like harken all the way back to the Hunger Games. The difference here, of course, is that this book is a coming of awareness of the young protagonist, Honor, who tried to change her name to Heloise because that would be a more appropriate name to fit in with everybody else as you figure out why as you go on. So, so look at how it goes on. Look at the sky. I mean, they say we're trying to simplify life, so there's only 7 stars. You put a fake canopy with it. However they do it, it's not enough to keep out the weather when a storm comes. Those are the things that you don't want to come. You want complete control, so you hate unpredictability. And as we know about weather, it's especially those of us who live in Nebraska most of the year, it's unpredictable. Trying to follow the course of a hurricane or whatever. So the whole idea of control is to make things predictable. And when you do it is that you have regimentation. All the girls and boys of a certain age, like Helix and Honor, all have H names and then J after a while because that's time's passing and whatnot. And this raises the question, because what Earth Mother professes to offer is safety and security. So therefore, you don't have a phone in your house, just a connection with your watchers. We're taking care of you. It always reminds me of a cult group that was in Oregon, as the Orange People. A lot of wealthy people who go to live and follow this one person, and they were in Antelope, Oregon. You can look them up. And one of the great things was that when these kinds of cults follow these prescriptions here of control, and the idea of control is that it's for your safety and security. And the question is how much of your freedom are you willing to give up for the comfort of discipline? This informs a lot of the literature. Well, in Antelope, you weren't supposed to or allowed to. We would know it say don't do that, but say, well, don't everybody's friends here, so you don't have any need to seal envelopes when you send letters through our postal service for you. And when I asked someone about that, and they said, well, we're just doing it for convenience. Nobody really likes the taste of that glue. And so we're doing this, to help everybody. So they don't, have to do distasteful things. But of course, they're reading all the letters. That's part of what's going on. But you always present this kind of a euphemistic terminology, very much of what happens in Unwind. I try to say a nicer way of saying we're going to murder you and divide up your parts. You have to say you're living in a different kind of life. So it makes it sound nice. Whereas the kids will call it a chop shop. The informal term. But euphemism is a powerful, powerful thing. And so you have, a weather station here. And weather is important in this world where the corporation is taken from cooperation with so it's not trying to mask the idea of corporate power, if you will. They've even taken over they have an anthem. If you notice too, they have a retelling of familiar stories, but they change everything so it's about weather and it's about stability. So I think Helix finds that he thinks he's stealing it from the librarian. Original wording from the Wizard of Oz, and Gale's one of the names there, and they take that out because a gale is a storm, and we don't want storms. We don't want any ambiguities. We want transparency, and so you're given a bill of sale that you have to watch out for, and so they have to mask what's going on in the Northern Islands. They have a model forest there. As compared to the actual forest. It's a good prompt for you to work with as an emblem for the actuality and the appearance of what goes on. And this, of course, is another theme that we find in almost all of the novels, masking the truth behind what something actually means. So look through, and the characters, Quintilian is named after a Roman rhetorician, the little son, the little boy, because right, again, the parents do something against the rules because you're only supposed to have one child. It's unnatural to have two almost. So they defined what's normal, redefined it, and in order to get along and get up in the world, you have to conform. And the whole idea is people are watching you all, whether the watchers could may as well be Big Brother, and Big Brother's masked by things like the weather station. Now we all want satellite stuff and things like that to let us know when a storm's coming. This is common sense, but if you read carefully here, you find out that personal records are kept at the weather station. What the hell that has to do with weather? But what it has to do is with security and safety, because we don't want unpredictables or inaccurate people. So look at this language and see how the familiar is made. It gives you vertigo after a while when it actually pulls the rug out and reveals this is not comfortable at all. And what is the price you're paying to conform? But also, what is the price that you pay to rebel, which takes us all the way back to the first novels we read. Although this one does feature a tree-climbing octopus. Nature does strange things, but that befriends Octavia, eight-handed Octavia, befriends Honor. So, as I was reading in one review saying, I'm not buying that. Well, you don't have to buy everything, but don't throw it off, because you do have interesting sets of circumstances and a character, Honor, whose parents don't follow the rules. And then you have, one of my favorite ones of all is the Orderlies. Yeah, they keep things in order. Of course, they're basically treated as subhumans. All shave their hair and do all these other things, and people really don't talk to them. It's pretty much the same way that all the H girls, uh, they ostracize Honor, who was their very dear friend the day before, once she becomes an orphan. And orphans, they have an O by their name, sort of like Risa Ward of the state, and their ability to become engineers, and engineers are in high demand in this technological society, and we don't see a lot of the technologies, but they're there. Uh, and she's never going to be able to do that because, well, orphans, we take care of them, but it's sort of like if you uh, get storked and you feel obliged to give up a child. Guess who's going to get storked? I mean, you should know too that in the second book, because everybody was wondering, well, how would millions of people give up children? Well, they don't. They don't need 1,000,000 people. They need a few thousand, and that's basically what the situation is a few thousand. In Unwind, yearly donate or tithe or for their children to make society better. And if you have millions and millions of people, you're going to have a few thousand religious fanatics or true believers in the system, the way the Admiral was in the beginning, who will take part in it. As a matter of fact, thanks to sci-fi, before the Congress, they have a new law at the very end of Unwind that says that you can't unwind a child once it reaches 17 years of birth. So that creates a supply and demand problem. And so you have lots more advertising about why one should give up a child. But if you say it enough times, people, that's one of the rules. So if you say it enough, people will start taking it as a fact. And things do change over time. And you see in our story that change is difficult sometimes, or to be a nonconformist. And I think you'd have to agree that in all of our books for young adults here, you have children, and mostly they're the ones who I would say empowered, but I get tired of that word. But they become agents for change. This last book is the only one, really, the one that where the agent for change. Well, actually, she's a lot like Todd in the beginning. Wants to conform but doesn't know any better, or Violet, who wants to be a part of these brain dead teens, other than Titus, seems to be more noble, as his name would suggest, than the others, and more and more you're finding that these novels show that if you're going to take a stand, it's not this easily happily forever after kind of thing. There are consequences. There's consequences if you don't act, which are probably more severe than if you, if you get involved. But there's pain involved, and quite often sacrifice. And this is kind of a new stream in the literature for young adults, and I think it's a good one. But you have to make your judgments on things like, is there too much violence here? Things along those lines. And certainly a lot of people raised objections to the violence in the Hunger Games. The way that people were treated, and graphically. And some would say, well, that's a good discussion thing. Now, I love those discussions. I may not agree with the other side, but I'm glad that people take the literature so seriously. And so I wish you a happy end of the semester. I've enjoyed immensely the reading with you, and I hope that you'll continue and pick up some of these sequels and look around on the lists. And, if you have questions or you want to tell me about a really cool book you've read, just email me. And if I've read it, I'll be glad to share ideas with you and thoughts about things. I'm more than happy to do that because I really do like the genre. Okay, you take good care, and all of you do a good job on the last week's discussion threads, and good luck on your final exam. Again.